The human warrior stood at the edge of the desolate battlefield, his armor scorched and dented from countless skirmishes. The alien landscape stretched before him, a kaleidoscope of colors that defied earthly logic. Violet skies streaked with emerald clouds, jagged crystalline formations jutting out like broken teeth against the horizon. His breath came in ragged gasps as he surveyed the aftermath of what had been an unfathomable war between two civilizations. Humanity's relentless quest for survival versus the enigmatic empire of beings whose very existence seemed woven from myth. He was alone now, or so it appeared. Around him lay remnants of both sides, shattered exoskeletons of insectoid creatures mingled with charred fragments of human machinery. The air crackled faintly with residual energy, remnants of weaponry far beyond anything Earth scientists could have dreamed up mere decades ago. But there was no time to reflect on the carnage or mourn those who would never return home. Something stirred within him, an instinctual pull, almost primal, urging him forward into the unknown heart of this alien world. As he stepped cautiously through the debris field, every movement felt deliberate, measured. Each step echoed unnaturally loud in the eerie silence that had settled over the terrain. It wasn't just fear gnawing at his gut, it was anticipation. He had heard whispers among his comrades about her, the alien queen. A figure shrouded in legend, spoken of only in hushed tones by their captives during interrogations. She was said to be more than just a leader. She embodied her species' essence, its collective will made manifest. And yet, despite all the stories, one detail haunted him most. They claimed she feared nothing. But today, something was different. Today, he sensed hesitation in the atmosphere itself. A shift subtle enough to go unnoticed by anyone else but impossible for him to ignore. Somewhere ahead, hidden behind towering spires of translucent rock, waited the reason he had fought so hard to reach this point. Not victory, not conquest, but truth. Whatever truths awaited him beyond those jagged peaks, he knew deep down that they would change everything. For himself, for humanity, perhaps even for the universe. And then he saw her. Emerging slowly from the shadows cast by the towering spires, her presence commanded attention without effort. She moved gracefully, each step calculated yet fluid, as if the ground beneath her yielded willingly to her authority. Her form was unlike anything he'd encountered before, tall and lithe, adorned with iridescent scales that shimmered under the strange light of the violet sky. They shifted colors subtly, reflecting hues of gold and sapphire, giving her an ethereal glow that seemed otherworldly. Her eyes, large and luminous, held a depth that suggested ancient wisdom, piercing through his very soul as she regarded him with cautious curiosity. Her attire, if it could be called that, was minimalistic yet strikingly intricate. Thin strands of metallic threads wove patterns across her body, highlighting rather than concealing her natural beauty. These threads pulsed faintly with bioluminescent energy, casting soft glows around her frame, emphasizing the elegance of her movements. As she drew closer, he noticed how these lights danced in sync with her breathing, almost as though they were alive, responding to her emotions. What struck him most profoundly, however, was not merely her appearance but the aura she exuded, an undeniable majesty mixed with an underlying vulnerability. This wasn't the ferocious ruler depicted in tales whispered among soldiers. Instead, she appeared regal yet approachable, commanding respect without demanding it. Every fiber of his being screamed to maintain vigilance, yet simultaneously, he found himself drawn to her magnetic presence. He realized then that this encounter transcended warfare. It was a meeting of two vastly different worlds, each trying desperately to understand the other amidst chaos and destruction. In her gaze, he saw questions mirroring his own. Who are you? What do you seek? Can we coexist? The moment stretched infinitely, neither of them moving, locked in a silent dialogue conducted solely through wary observation. Then, with deliberate slowness, he extended his hand towards her, a gesture universally understood across countless cultures on Earth. He watched intently as confusion flickered briefly across her features before recognition dawned. With equal deliberation, she reached out, her fingers tapering elegantly, encased lightly in glistening membranes. Their hands met mid-air, his gloved palm pressing gently against hers. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, unexpectedly, a surge of warmth radiated from where their skins touched, or rather, where his glove met her membrane. It wasn't physical heat but something deeper, resonating within him, stirring memories and emotions long buried under layers of battle-hardened resolve. She trembled visibly, her usually stoic demeanor faltering. Shock rippled through him, not because she showed fear, which contradicted everything he believed about her, but because her trembling seemed born not of terror, but awe. Her eyes widened slightly, pupils dilating as though overwhelmed by some profound realization. The luminescent threads adorning her body flared brighter, pulsing erratically, mirroring her inner turmoil. In that instant, barriers crumbled. This wasn't just a handshake, it was communion, a bridge forged between two sentient beings standing on opposite ends of existence. He felt it too, the weight of centuries pressing down upon him, whispering secrets of stars and voids untold. It was humbling, terrifying, exhilarating, all at once. Through this simple touch, they communicated volumes without uttering a single word. For reasons unclear even to himself, he tightened his grip ever so slightly, anchoring them both in reality. Her trembling subsided gradually, replaced by a newfound steadiness. When she finally withdrew her hand, retreating back into herself, he noticed a transformation. Gone was the initial apprehension. In its place stood resolve hardened by understanding. They stood facing each other now, no longer adversaries bound by conflict but explorers charting uncharted territories of mutual comprehension. Around them, the alien landscape continued its silent vigil, bearing witness to a moment that transcended mere diplomacy or truce. It was Genesis, the birth of something unprecedented. As they stood there, suspended in the gravity of their shared moment, the air between them began to hum with an unspoken dialogue. Neither needed words to convey the torrent of thoughts and emotions coursing through them. Her eyes, vast pools of luminescent galaxies, searched his face with an intensity that spoke of centuries of solitude and the burden of leadership. Yet, there was also a spark of hope, fragile yet persistent, flickering in those depths. He felt compelled to speak, though he hesitated, unsure if his voice would shatter the delicate balance they had achieved. "You feared me," he ventured softly, his voice barely above a whisper, carrying none of the bravado expected from a seasoned warrior. It was a statement tinged with disbelief, questioning the very foundation of what he thought he knew about her kind. Her response was immediate, conveyed not through speech but through a series of subtle gestures. Her head tilted slightly, a universal sign of inquiry turned gentle by the fluidity of her movements. Then, with a grace that belied the strength inherent in her form, she extended her hand again, this time touching his forearm lightly. The contact sent another wave of warmth through him, but this time it carried nuances, colors of emotion he couldn't quite name but felt acutely. It dawned on him then that her trembling had not been born of fear of him as a threat, but of something far more complex. Perhaps it was the realization of their shared mortality, the acknowledgement of pain and loss etched deeply into the fabric of their respective existences. Or maybe it was the overwhelming potential of connection, the daunting prospect of bridging chasms carved by millennia of separation. A sudden gust swept through the valley, rustling the crystalline spires and sending ripples through the thin metallic threads that adorned her. In that moment, she looked away, towards the horizon where the battlefield stretched endlessly. Her posture changed subtly, shoulders squaring as if bracing herself against unseen winds. When she turned back to him, her expression had shifted, hardened slightly, as if steeling herself for revelations yet to come. He followed her gaze, seeing what she saw, the devastation wrought by war, the scars left by mistrust and misunderstanding. Turning back to her, he nodded slowly, acknowledging silently that they were more alike than different. Both leaders, both survivors, both weary from battles fought not just with weapons but with hearts and minds. The realization hit him with the force of a revelation. This wasn't about conquering or submitting. It was about forging a path where none existed before. As they stood there, surrounded by the remnants of conflict, a new narrative was beginning to weave itself, one of tentative steps towards peace, guided by the courage to face fears not with weapons, but with open hands and open hearts. The pause between them lengthened, heavy with unspoken questions and the echoes of past wars. Slowly, deliberately, she gestured again, this time with both hands, tracing lines in the air that seemed to ripple with traces of the same bioluminescence that danced along her body. It was a language older than words, a script written in the very fabric of existence. He watched, entranced, as each gesture painted invisible symbols that lingered momentarily before fading into the ether. His mind raced to decipher the meaning behind her movements. Was she recounting history, weaving a tapestry of her people's journey through the cosmos? Or was she offering something else, a glimpse into the soul of her civilization, a plea for understanding wrapped in the elegance of dance-like communication. Whatever it was, he felt the weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders anew. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about representing humanity at a crossroads where missteps could mean annihilation, while courage might forge alliances beyond imagining. He took a step closer, mimicking her gestures tentatively, feeling absurdly clumsy compared to her fluid grace. Yet, as his hands moved awkwardly through the air, he saw her eyes soften slightly, a flicker of amusement, or perhaps approval, crossing her features. Encouraged, he continued, letting instinct guide his motions, attempting to mirror the rhythm and flow of her signs. It was a clumsy attempt at conversation, fraught with errors, but it was a start, a bridge spanning the chasm of silence between them. Around them, the environment seemed to respond, the crystalline spires humming gently, their vibrations harmonizing with the bioluminescent pulses emanating from her. The wind picked up, swirling around them, carrying particles of dust that caught the light and sparkled like stardust. It was as if the planet itself bore witness to their exchange, lending its voice to the symphony of their interaction. Then, unexpectedly, she halted her movements and pointed towards the horizon, where the first hints of a dual sunset began to paint the sky in strokes of lavender and crimson. Her expression was inscrutable, yet urgent, as if conveying a message too critical for misinterpretation. Following her gaze, he squinted against the gathering dusk, trying to discern what she directed his attention to. At first, there was nothing but the familiar desolation of the battlefield. But then he saw it, a faint shimmer on the edge of visibility, like heat waves rising from the ground, distorting the view. Turning back to her, he found her watching him intently, her earlier trembling entirely absent now. There was purpose in her stance, determination etched into every line of her elegant form. She gestured once more, this time towards herself, then to him, and finally to the shimmering horizon. It was unmistakable, an invitation, or perhaps a challenge. Whatever awaited them there, it was clear that the next chapter of their story lay beyond the battlefield, hidden in the twilight where realities blurred and possibilities expanded like the universe itself. As they approached the shimmering horizon, the air grew heavier, thick with an energy that prickled against his skin even through his armor. The ground beneath their feet began to shift subtly, no longer solid but rippling like liquid glass. He hesitated for a moment, glancing down at the translucent surface that seemed alive, pulsing faintly in sync with the rhythm of her bioluminescent threads. She noticed his pause and turned to face him, her luminous eyes locking onto his with an intensity that silenced any doubt he might have had about proceeding. Her hand found his again, this time gripping it firmly, not out of fear or trembling, but as if anchoring him to reality. The touch sent another wave of warmth coursing through him, but this time it carried something else, urgency. It was then that he realized the shimmer wasn't just a visual phenomenon, it was a threshold, a gateway to something far beyond what either of them could comprehend. Before he could process further, the world around them dissolved into light. For a fleeting second, he felt weightless, untethered from everything familiar. His senses were overwhelmed by a kaleidoscope of colors and sounds, hues too vivid to name, melodies that resonated deep within his bones. And then, as suddenly as it began, the chaos settled, leaving them standing on what appeared to be a floating platform suspended in an endless void. The alien queen released his hand and stepped forward, her movements fluid despite the surreal environment. Around them, stars wheeled lazily in the distance, their light casting soft glows across her iridescent form. But it wasn't the celestial display that caught his attention, it was the structure rising before them, a colossal spire made entirely of crystalline material that refracted the starlight into dazzling patterns. At its base stood figures, humanoid yet distinctly alien, their forms cloaked in flowing garments that shimmered like liquid silver. His breath hitched as one of the figures detached itself from the group and approached them. Unlike the queen beside him, this being radiated authority not through presence alone but through sheer aura, an invisible force that pressed against his chest, making it hard to breathe. Its eyes glowed with a cold, calculating intelligence, and when it spoke, the words bypassed language entirely, embedding themselves directly into his mind. "You have crossed boundaries not meant to be crossed," the voice echoed, neither male nor female, but something altogether otherworldly. "Why do you bring her here?" He opened his mouth to respond, but no sound came out. Panic clawed at the edges of his consciousness as he struggled to formulate a coherent thought. Before he could attempt again, The queen stepped forward, placing herself between him and the imposing figure. Her posture was defiant now, every line of her body exuding protectiveness. To his astonishment, she responded, not in gestures or silent communication, but in audible tones that resonated like chimes struck by wind. "He is my guest," she said, her voice melodic yet firm. "And you will not harm him." The declaration hung in the air, heavy with implications. The figure tilted its head slightly, studying her with an expression that bordered on amusement. "You defy us for a human? A creature whose kind has spilled rivers of our blood." Her response was immediate, cutting through the tension like a blade. "He is more than his species. He is different." The word struck him harder than any weapon ever could. Different. That single word carried layers of meaning, none of which he fully understood but all of which resonated deeply within him. Was she referring to the connection they had forged? Or was there something else, something about him that set him apart from the rest of humanity? The figure regarded them both silently for a moment before turning its gaze back to the queen. "Very well," it said finally, though the tone suggested anything but acceptance. "But know this, your actions will have consequences. For both of you." With that, the being turned and gestured toward the crystalline spire. A doorway appeared, glowing faintly, inviting, or perhaps demanding, entry. The queen glanced at him briefly, her expression unreadable, before stepping forward without hesitation. He followed, though every instinct screamed at him to turn back. As they crossed the threshold, the air shifted once more, charged with an electric tension that made his hair stand on end. Inside, the space defied logic. Walls stretched impossibly high, lined with intricate carvings that seemed to move when viewed indirectly. Floating platforms hovered at various levels, connected by arcs of light that pulsed rhythmically. On one such platform stood another figure, smaller and less imposing than the first, yet radiating a quiet power that drew his attention immediately. This new entity held something in its hands, a sphere of pure energy that pulsed with colors so vibrant they hurt to look at. As they ascended toward it, guided by unseen forces, the queen tensed visibly. Whatever the sphere was, it clearly held significance. For her people, perhaps even for the fate of both their worlds. When they reached the platform, the figure extended the sphere toward them, offering it silently. The queen hesitated, her earlier confidence wavering for the first time since they had entered this strange realm. She looked at him, her eyes searching his face for answers he didn't possess. Then, without warning, the sphere floated from the figure's grasp and hovered between them. It began to speak, not in words, but in images and sensations that flooded their minds. Visions of war, destruction, reconciliation, and unity unfolded in rapid succession, each accompanied by emotions so raw they left him reeling. Among these visions, one stood out starkly, a future where humans and aliens coexisted peacefully, working together to heal the scars left by centuries of conflict. But intertwined with this hopeful vision was a darker thread, one of betrayal, loss, and unimaginable sacrifice. He saw himself in those images, standing at the center of events that would shape destinies far greater than his own. And he saw her, the queen, making choices that would tear her apart, choices driven by trust in him. The sphere's glow dimmed as the visions faded, leaving them in stunned silence. The smaller figure spoke then, its voice softer but no less commanding. "The path ahead is fraught with peril. Trust must be earned, not given freely. Will you accept the burden?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. The queen turned to him, her expression a mixture of hope and dread. In her eyes, he saw the weight of expectation, and the fragile flicker of belief that maybe, just maybe, he was capable of bearing it. What neither of them noticed, however, was the faint shadow lingering at the edge of the platform, a presence watching silently, waiting for the right moment to strike. The shadow shifted almost imperceptibly, blending seamlessly with the pulsating light arcs that crisscrossed the vast chamber. It was only when a low hum resonated through the space, discordant and jarring against the otherwise harmonious environment, that both the human warrior and the alien queen turned their attention toward it. The figure emerged slowly, its form indistinct at first, as though it were composed of fragmented pieces of darkness stitched together by malice. As it solidified, details came into focus, elongated limbs ending in razor-sharp claws, eyes like molten lava burning with hatred, and an aura of decay that seemed to warp the very air around it. "You dare bring him here?" the creature hissed, its voice a guttural amalgamation of growls and whispers that slithered into their minds rather than their ears. "This abomination? This destroyer?" The queen stepped forward instinctively, positioning herself between the intruder and the human. Her bioluminescent threads flared brighter, casting sharp contrasts against the encroaching gloom. "Enough," she commanded, her tone unwavering despite the menace radiating from the newcomer. "He is under my protection." The shadow being let out a sound akin to laughter, but there was no humor in it, only venom. "Protection? From what?" "Himself." It gestured wildly, and suddenly the visions within the sphere replayed in vivid detail, faster this time, overwhelming them with flashes of destruction and despair. Each image targeted the warrior specifically. Cities reduced to ash, alien bodies strewn across battlefields, and finally, the queen herself, fallen, broken, betrayed. He staggered under the weight of those images, clutching his head as if trying to physically shake off the torrent of dread they carried. But before he could fully succumb, the queen reached back and gripped his arm tightly. The warmth of her touch acted as an anchor, grounding him against the tide of fear and guilt threatening to drown him. "Stop this!" she demanded, her voice slicing through the oppressive atmosphere like a blade. She raised one hand, palm outward, toward the shadow being. A surge of energy erupted from her fingertips, colliding with the entity's dark form in a burst of blinding light. For a moment, the creature recoiled, its outline flickering as though struggling to maintain cohesion. But then it retaliated, lashing out with tendrils of shadow that snaked through the air, seeking purchase on anything they could corrupt. One tendril struck the crystalline spire behind them, causing cracks to spiderweb across its surface. Another grazed the floating platform beneath their feet, destabilizing it momentarily. The entire structure groaned under the strain, shaking violently as shards of crystal rained down like deadly hail. Amidst the chaos, the smaller figure who had presented the sphere earlier raised its hands, chanting softly in a language neither the warrior nor the queen understood. The chant resonated throughout the chamber, creating a barrier of shimmering energy that pushed back against the encroaching shadows. But the effort clearly drained the figure, its form wavering as sweat, or something akin to it, beaded on its translucent skin. Seeing this, the queen acted decisively. With a swift motion, she pulled the warrior closer, wrapping her arms around him protectively. "Hold on," she whispered urgently, her breath warm against his ear. Before he could question her intent, she leapt forward, not merely stepping but phasing through the air, carrying them both toward the source of the conflict. They landed hard on another platform higher up, closer to the epicenter of the confrontation. Here, the air crackled with raw power, charged by opposing forces clashing in a maelstrom of light and shadow. The shadow being roared in fury, its form swelling grotesquely as it absorbed fragments of the surrounding darkness. Its gaze locked onto the queen, filled with a mixture of betrayal and loathing. "You would side with them? After everything they've done?" Her response was calm but resolute. "I side with hope. With change. What you offer is extinction, a cycle of vengeance that will consume us all." She turned slightly, glancing at the warrior beside her. "And I side with trust, no matter the cost." Those words ignited something within him, a spark of resolve that burned away the lingering doubt planted by the shadow being's manipulations. He straightened, meeting her gaze with newfound determination. Whatever trials lay ahead, whatever sacrifices awaited them, he would not falter. Not now. Not when so much depended on their unity. As if sensing this shift, the shadow being lunged at them, its claws extended. Time seemed to slow as the queen reacted instantly, spinning gracefully to intercept the attack. Her movements were fluid yet precise, each step calculated to deflect or counter the creature's strikes. Yet for every blow she parried, two more came hurtling toward them, relentless and unyielding. Realizing she couldn't hold it off indefinitely, the warrior searched frantically for something, anything, he could use to tip the scales. His eyes fell upon the sphere still hovering nearby, its glow dimmed but not extinguished. Acting on instinct, he sprinted toward it, dodging shadowy tendrils that snapped at his heels like vipers. When he reached the sphere, he hesitated only briefly before placing his hands on its surface. Energy surged through him, coursing through his veins like liquid fire. Visions flooded his mind again, but this time he didn't resist them. Instead, he embraced the torrent, letting it guide him. He saw moments of courage and sacrifice, acts of defiance against overwhelming odds. And he saw himself, not as a destroyer, but as a bridge, a catalyst for transformation. When he opened his eyes, the sphere pulsed brightly, responding to his will. He hurled it toward the shadow being just as the queen was forced to retreat, her strength waning. The sphere struck true, embedding itself in the creature's chest. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, with a deafening scream, the shadow being began to unravel, dissolving into wisps of smoke that dissipated into nothingness. Silence fell over the chamber, broken only by the labored breathing of those still standing. The queen approached him cautiously, her expression a mix of awe and concern. What did you do?" she asked softly. Before he could answer, the smaller figure spoke again, its voice weak but steady. "You have altered the balance. Both of your worlds are now intertwined, for better or worse." A tremor ran through the structure, more violent than before. Cracks spread rapidly along the walls and ceiling, threatening to collapse the entire edifice. Without hesitation, the queen grabbed his hand once more. "We must go. Now." Together, they raced toward the exit, pursued by the crumbling remnants of the spire. Behind them, the doorway shimmered faintly, beckoning them home, or perhaps somewhere entirely new. As they crossed the threshold, the world dissolved around them once more, leaving only one certainty. Whatever future awaited them, it would be forged not by destiny, but by their choices, and the trust they dared to place in each other. As they emerged from the collapsing spire, the world around them shifted violently. The alien landscape they had left behind was gone, replaced by an endless expanse of shimmering void. Stars flickered in the distance, their light dimmed as if mourning the turmoil that had unfolded. The queen stumbled slightly, her strength waning, but the warrior caught her, his grip firm despite his own exhaustion. Her eyes met his, filled with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. "You've changed everything," she whispered, her voice trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of what lay ahead. He nodded, unable to find words to match the enormity of the moment. The smaller figure reappeared beside them, its form faint but resolute. "Your bond has rewritten the rules of existence," it said, its tone neither approving nor condemning. "But balance demands sacrifice. Are you prepared for the cost?" Before either could respond, the void began to collapse inward, pulling at them with inexorable force. The queen tightened her hold on him, her bioluminescent threads flaring one last time, brighter than ever before. "No matter what happens," she said, her voice steady now, "trust me." And then, with a blinding flash, the void imploded, swallowing them whole. When the light faded, they found themselves standing on a desolate planet, neither hers nor his, but something entirely new. The sky above churned with storm clouds, yet shafts of golden sunlight pierced through, illuminating ruins that hinted at civilizations long past. Around them, figures began to emerge, humans and aliens alike, drawn by some unseen force. They carried tools, seeds, and fragments of technology, their expressions wary but hopeful. It was clear, this was a place where two worlds would collide, forced to rebuild or perish together. The queen turned to him, her gaze unwavering. "This is our beginning, and perhaps our end." She extended her hand once more, not out of fear, but as an invitation. He took it without hesitation, their connection stronger than ever. Together, they stepped forward into the unknown, ready to face whatever came next. Behind them, the first tentative steps toward unity were already being taken. But in the distance, shadows stirred, hinting at challenges yet unseen. As the sun broke through the clouds, casting its light over the fledgling settlement, the warrior whispered softly, "We'll make it work. We have to." Her smile was faint but resolute. "Then let's begin." And with that, they walked side by side into the dawn of a fragile new era, one built not on conquest, but on trust.